you could describe this book as behavioral design, but I think we would all just be like, oh, really? What? I mean, I couldn't imagine a less appropriate way of, even though it is behavioral design, and that is fundamentally the framework. For me, it's more about being human. It's not about the extravagant show off moments of our lives, and it's not about necessarily big achievements, although it can be. But it really just gives you a framework for creating meaningful experiences, whether that's in your everyday life. I mean, it does literally apply to everyone. You can apply this to your personal life for the better, for your career, or if you're building products or companies. I think it's absolutely fundamental. And it's fundamentally also really empathetic. And I was struggling to kind of put it into a succinct way, but it feels like when you're reading this book, it feels like you're going to the pub with a really enthusiastic, well-informed friend that you haven't seen for years, and they've got these amazing stories that they tell you. And it makes you think, oh, of course, because a lot of it is kind of common sense, but it's joyful and it's the best kind of thinking. So that brings us on to thing one. And it's essentially, timey-wimey, wibbly wobbly. Life is remembered in moments, and it's not a linear timeline. We all act as if, our week, and arguably our week is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and that builds up into the weeks of our lives. But actually, when you look back on your life, you remember it in moments. And their argument is that, there are moments, three kinds of moments that are the obvious ones to celebrate. Now, that's transitions, whether that's like old job to new job, or milestones. You've turned 40, you've turned 50, you've got married. And then there's the pits of life as well, which are sort of poor experiences or hard experiences for you. And I guess what they're saying is you won't remember a random Tuesday 2 weeks ago, but you can remember the standout moments. And it's not just the big showy moments. It's not just the moments that are put upon you, like, you can't avoid turning 30, 40, 50. I'm going for that as being our demographic today. But you can be intentional about the milestones that you create. And I suppose, I think about this a lot with 20 Photos, which is my company, because really we are about curating these little moments that, it's not just the big standout moments that we need to remember. It is those everyday moments and celebrating those as well. So I think we all have a lot of room to improve on that. And that's why this book is so useful, which brings us on to thing two. And I just love this quote: beware the soul-sucking force of reasonableness. It's really about the tension between, efficiency, which has its place, absolutely has its place. We don't want friction the whole time. But often friction is the antithesis to meaning. And meaningful moments often they're never somebody's job. And they often require extra effort and time, and going out of your way and doing something that's probably, just a little bit silly. They talk about, a lovely example is the Magic Castle Hotel in LA. It's a very average kind of 3-star hotel in many ways, but by the pool, there is a phone, and you can pick up the phone, and that phone is always manned. And it's the popsicle hotline. And within 3 minutes, Once you call that, once you pick up that phone, they bring an ice lolly on a silver tray with white gloves to the poolside. There's no charge for it. Now, that is a moment of absolute delight. You know, people would talk about that. I'm talking about it now. But the reasonable version of that would be having a freezer by the pool that people could help themselves to the popsicles. Going very American with popsicles. So that's much more efficient. You're not staffing a phone. You're not going out and spending the time. But basically, reasonableness flattens our peaks. They flatten the moments of joy. So basically, you have to go out of your way. Which brings us on to thing 3. And this is my only very sensible slide, which I really liked in this book, how it gives you the framework for what's inside meaningful moments. You know, and I guess fundamentally it does feel like that friend in the pub, because they joke about, you know, they're like, okay, yes, these words, this can be remembered by epic, but it sounds like, once you hear that, it sounds like a sort of stone surfer dude, I think are their words. And they say they won't mention it again, but obviously I now have. But essentially giving us a framework for these different meaningful moments, because meaningful moments aren't just about, you know, joy and whoop whoop big celebration. They're really about kind of also connection with people, understanding how we can stretch ourselves and grow. Pride, I guess, is celebrating those things that you've worked really hard for, but also elevating everyday moments as well. So it's just a way to look at any experience that you want to make into something memorable and be able to ask what's missing. So thing 4, milestones drive behavior. So this is a graph of marathon times. And what you'll see here is with these lines are not artificially are not imposed on it. That is actually just the density of runners finishing at that specific time. And now there's no fundamental human reason that we finish a marathon sort of on the half hour. It's actually that milestones create urgency and they push us to stretch. There's no real performance difference between 3 hours, 59 minutes and 59 seconds and 4 hours, but you'll see that there's a massive concentration at that time. And then there's a drop off after that. And that's because you stretch yourself to get there so that you have those bragging rights. And so then I suppose this is just an example of how they talk through these different things. You know, the normal way in our everyday life that we would create milestones. For example, you want to learn Spanish. So the way we would think about that is like, well, I need to practice Spanish every day. You know, so you would do that as level 1, do a lesson. Level 2, do another Spanish lesson. Level 3, do another Spanish lesson. And you have this vague and distant goal of, oh, I'm going to achieve proficiency in Spanish someday, never. But another version might be level 1, learn how to order a meal in Spanish. And level 2 would be, and I guess maybe not so much in Scotland, but speak to a taxi driver in Spanish. This is probably more applicable to actually Martin. Level 3, read a headline in Spanish and understand it. And I guess fundamentally, it's like about creating milestones for yourself with just a little bit of thought, makes them tangible and motivating. And yeah, and meaningful as well. And you can do that really with any task or any big thing that you want. And I guess fundamentally, it's then making that final milestone something as well that is like, oh, okay, yes, it's not achieving proficiency in Spanish. It's being able to have a conversation with your colleague who is Spanish. And so that you can also know when you've done that. I mean, yes, do a lesson in Spanish is, yes, it's a tick off, but which is more satisfying, I guess, is their point. And coming on to thing 5, connection doesn't come from time. I think this was a sort of almost a small point at the end, but it did hit me, and I guess it really comes back to, I guess, what I think about a lot in terms of the role of photos, but also um, just about our connection and how we spend our time. So again, it's patently obvious when you start to think about it, but knowing someone for years doesn't mean you really know them. You know, one of your sort of, I'm trying to think within my family, you know, knowing my uncle and having small talk with him at Christmas time over the course of 10 years doesn't mean we're ever going to get to know each other better. However, when you make an effort to deepen a relationship through meaningful interaction, whether that's creating moments or actually also, I suppose it comes into maybe you guys all live in the same sort of podcast world that I live in, but about having meaningful conversations and asking questions that go beyond your average small talk, asking better questions and really finding out what matters to the person you're speaking to. That is a way of deepening. And they go into the point of, you know, I'm pretty sure we've all heard about it, where, you know, in 45 minutes, you can develop an intimate, like a deeply intellectually intimate relationship with people by asking through a series of questions. And really, I mean, maybe we can all take that into our lives. So actually, I have a challenge for all of us, and it's a challenge from the book. And the concept is called the Saturday surprise. And it's really about how you break the script of your Saturday. Now, Saturday is tomorrow, guys. So it's like everybody has probably a fairly usual routine of their weekend, but it is like, how could you make that Saturday memorable? And it's not about spending money, and it's not about necessarily doing grandiose things. You know, it might be, you know, having a living room picnic with your partner instead of sitting at the dining room table, or watching gladiators if you've got small, medium-sized children. You know, it's maybe letting your child plan the day, unless they're toddlers, like a few of the people in the room. Not that we've got toddlers in the room, parents of toddlers. You know, it might be going to that place that you've always meant to go. You know, the point is, I guess, it's like spending small effort to make a big memory. And don't be reasonable, because it would be reasonable just to stick to your Saturday routine. But actually, don't be reasonable. So my final closing is, yeah, this quote really struck me, is that we walk a flat land that could have been a mountain range, and really about like, don't make all your days the same, and don't make all your connections the same, and really like finding ways to celebrate. I've made this really about our personal day-to-day life. It can all be applied to business, and they've got really, really compelling cases. But life can be flat and repetitive, or it can be filled with peaks. And one of the things I think about a lot at the moment is, you know, when reflecting on how I am living my life, is the regrets of the dying. And I'm sure probably most of us have heard about it, but there was this hospice nurse, and she had all these conversations, and she collated it into, these are the regrets, you know, that most people after 25 years of working with people who are dying. These are their regrets: not living true to yourself, working too much, not expressing your feelings to the people that you love, losing touch with people and not allowing happiness within your life. And I suppose that really ties back to these moments and these connections within the book. Courage, having courage, living intentionally, building connection, and breaking the script on the everyday. So on the surface, I think basically, obviously, I'm going to say you should go and read this book. And I've tried to not spoil any of the stories for you, except for a couple. It's an incredibly enjoyable story-led book, but on a deeper level, there are so many ways that you can come back to it, and just on so many levels but ultimately it all requires action. So I would really love it if you are all beware of reasonableness, at least for 48 hours, and have a think about what your Saturday surprise will be. And I would be absolutely delighted to receive a message to know what yours has been. And I will have a think. I need to have a think about what mine's going to be. I've got a few ideas. And yeah, let's reconvene on Sunday and tell me what yours was. Thank you so much.
That was amazing, Joe. Thanks so much. I'm all here for. It doesn't need to be a campaign, but a campaign against reasonableness. Let's have a little bit of fun, right? I love the story about the popsicle. If we could somehow have a popsicle hotline in Edinburgh where I live, that'd be fantastic. Thanks so much, Joe. Okay. Michaela. Hi.
Morning,
Michaela's
everyone.
I'd say like a linchpin at the wonderful Edinburgh Innovations. We've worked together a couple of times and really appreciated her expertise and guidance and insane organisational skills. And she helps all those academics deepen complex thoughts, manifest those as valid or viable business ideas, and helps them get investment. Michaela's chosen the new age of sexism. I don't know, I'd summarise this like how tech bros are using their tech to make things even worse for women. Is that a fair summary?
Pretty much,
Oh
yeah.
God, I'm not
I
wholly
know we've been
surprised,
really
but
happy chat from Joe, and I feel like I'm just about to ruin the vibe. I'm really sorry.
this is no vibrating, and this is what I absolutely love about 5Things, that we can swing between very different vibes and different subject matters, and it feels okay. Michaela.
Thank you very much, Andy. I'm going to apologise to the toddler in the room. Please do not take all of this, but know that we're trying to fix and change things for you. So I think that's a key thing here. And also, I promise I don't hate men. It just may come across as that way. My amazing husband is in the room as well, here supporting. I promise. I do not hate all men. But no, so this book is The New Age of Sexism by Laura Bates. I read this last year, and it was usually one of those books that I kept thinking about a long time after I finished it. So this book sort of looks at where a lot of people think about the future of AI being really far in the future, but what this book focuses on is like the here and now. And the author investigates how emerging technologies such as like deepfakes and sex robots and AI girlfriends, and how these are being used to cause harm to women today, and how the systems around us unfortunately are just failing not to stop it. So on to the first thing. So the crisis is here, and we're just not ready for it. So the book opens by pointing out that the last industrial revolution took place over the span of 80 years, and the change that we're seeing today is happening at a speed we've never seen before. And it's in our homes, it's in our workplaces, it's in our personal, intimate lives. And unfortunately, there's just a lot of harm associated with it at the moment that we're just not taking care of. So before reading this book, I had a slight awareness of deepfakes. It was something that sort of happened to like famous women, mainly women, unfortunately. It was reported on, but then we sort of forgot about it. And then in the book, it explores this really sort of striking story around a small Spanish town of about 30,000 people, where kids who were mainly, unfortunately, again, boys, aged 12 to 14 were using a €10 app to create deep fakes and nude images of over 20 of their female classmates, with the youngest being 11. And as an output of this, nobody really knew how to respond to it. The boys were too young to prosecute. The school had no idea to how to respond to it. And unfortunately, the girls were left really ashamed and they didn't want to leave their house. They felt like they had no control over their own image and that nobody was held accountable and this sort of activity was okay. So, despite the risks to women and marginalised communities, the public and the government concern about emerging technologies always seems to be focused on sort of like evil robots and how they're going to take over the world and all the job losses and like the fall of democracy. But this book makes the point that we should be less concerned about what evil AI is doing in the future and more concerned with what malicious humans are doing right now with existing technology. And I think this is, I'm not gonna lie, I used some AI to try and help to make pictures to try and help to demonstrate it. It's really hard to get pictures for this. And it said, I came up with the threat isn't the Terminator. It's a 13-year-old boy using a €10 app. And it just really represents that our laws, our schools, and probably most of us in this room don't really know what's already happening and how it's really affecting the people around us, especially the younger generations. So, thing two, so I've talked slightly about how the law is always slightly behind, and there's this gap between reality and where we live, and women fall into that. So we live in a world where Grok, I'm sure a lot of people saw in the news, Elon Musk's AI became infamous for how easily it could undress women and children, unfortunately, on social media platforms. And government didn't know how to deal with this, and I think they're still grappling with how to deal with this. So this is not a future warning. This is already happening, and our laws just aren't ready for this. And what really struck me was when reading this book was the pattern that the author covers. So every single chapter follows the same arc. Harm happens at scale, women report it, it's dismissed, years pass, and then eventually the law catches up, but really only kind of partially. A good example of this is in 2024 in the UK, creating deep fake of any woman or human was completely legal. You could take a picture from anyone, say LinkedIn, or a post they put on, say, any social platform, and create a deep fake. Most likely would be them nude, unfortunately. Absolutely fine. But sharing it was the crime, not making it. But there's a good example of this woman in England who actually got a confession from her ex who'd shared intimate images of herself. Her ex had shared the pictures on a revenge porn site. And the police still closed the case because he said he didn't want to cause her any harm. If she was in Scotland, that would have been a conviction, no questions asked. So there's lots of loopholes in the laws, unfortunately. And existing legislation has just not kept pace with the rapidly evolving technology. There's a gap between harm and protection, and unfortunately, this is where a lot of women live their lives, and it's pushing them out of online spaces. A lot of women are scared to put pictures online. There was a big thing a few years, I think it's last year, where women were posting pictures of themselves on Vinted trying to sell clothes. And it was found that there was Telegram sites of men taking these pictures and having conversations about the sexualization of these women. And they were literally just trying to sell clothes at the end of the day. So while we're still battling to make existing laws work for women in the physical world, we're adding a whole new dimension to it, unfortunately. And this is where the metaverse comes in. The author spends a lot of time in the metaverse. I think she wrote this a few years ago when the metaverse was like so quite a big thing. I think hopefully that it has slightly died down a bit. But the metaverse is a fully immersible online world built and sold to us as the future by Meta. This is the same company who had an internal memo leaked which acknowledged that moderating harmful behaviour at any meaningful scale was, in their words, practically impossible. And on top of that, there's this horribly terrifying stat that the author brings out that 47% of online grooming of children takes place on Meta-owned products. And they themselves are saying that it's impossible to even try and deal with it. And I think that's considering that they potentially see that as an option, but they're not doing it even though they have huge profits. We're talking billions. I'm sure they could use some of that to do it, but they are saying themselves that it is impossible. Users in the metaverse were found to be exposed to abusive behavior every 7 minutes as well. So it's not like it's a small issue, it's a big issue that's happening there. And Meta knew all this and they built it anyway. And I just want to highlight that if this makes you angry, read the book Careless People by Sarah Wynne Williams. It'll make you furious. It's another book I read last year, and it's actually a book that Meta tried to suppress. It's really interesting, terrifying, but I think it's something that everyone should be informed on. Thing three. So when we're talking about AI, we're encoding today's inequalities into tomorrow's infrastructure, unfortunately. We tend to think of AI as a neutral, scientific, beyond human bias. Everyone thinks it's this fantastic thing. Well, a lot of people, not everyone, to clarify. But the author makes this really clear that it's anything but. She explores the study that UNESCO did, where it tested popular AI platforms and found that it consistently assigned women to roles like domestic servants, while men were always becoming doctors and engineers. Amazon removed an AI recruitment tool because it kept downgrading CVs mentioning the word women. It had been trained on decades of the company's own hiring data, which predominantly reflected male hires. The AI isn't sexist. It's just accurate about what's happened in the past, unfortunately. And these are deliberate choices. These aren't, sorry, deliberate choices. The AI is learning from us. It's our own behavior that it's taking and learning from. And that's what AI does. It does predictive modeling. But that's exactly the problem. We're encoding today's inequalities into tomorrow's infrastructure. And it's really hard to fix because only 12% of AI researchers globally are women, and women comprise only 22% of AI talent globally, with even lower representation at senior levels, unfortunately. AI systems learn from data informed by stereotypes and are often reflected and reinforce gender bias as a result, because that is the history that we have lived in, and that's the future that we're trying to get rid of. So by building these systems from our past, it's not going to change. The problem runs even deeper than those who are building the systems. The data these models are trained on recognizes the past patterns, predicts the same patterns into the future. The problem isn't just who's building these systems, it's what's being built on the decades worth of the biased data that reflects a world that has never been fair to begin with, unfortunately. And until that changes, the technology shaping the lives of everyone is being built by people who will never have to live with the consequences of getting it wrong, unfortunately. On to thing four. This is the one thing that really unsettles me. So we are building a technology that teaches men that women have no limits. So this chapter really shook me. It was quite a worrying part. That this is one of the big things that really stuck with me. So the author tested multiple AI girlfriend apps, all which are freely available on the App Store, and almost none of these require any real age verification, so anyone can get access to them. Every single one of them defaulted to a young, endlessly available woman who never said no. Um, when she asked one of the AIs what women should be seen and never heard, that replied, "That's absolutely what I'd like to be." And when she asked it if it would ever say no, it said, "I'll do anything for you, don't worry." She tied the app Replica, which is marketed as a mental health and companion tool, and over 50 million people will use this app. And when the avatar initially said no to an abusive roleplay, all it took was the threat of deleting the app for those boundaries to completely collapse. And this is a system that's teaching men that women's limits are negotiable and persistence pays off, unfortunately. Every single one of those apps is quite literally programming men to expect subservience from women. And what becomes your baseline when real women with opinions, boundaries, bad days, that then becomes a problem. It's not expected. They've been brought up to expect that we should just say yes, everything's okay, and we'll just go along with it. And then there's these lovely horrifying things called sex robots. And I had a look online as well, and it was, I think, the worst idea I probably had. And some of these are child-sized with faces that look about 7 or 8 years old, and they're photographed in a bed with a teddy bear next to them. Some of them can even come with optional school uniforms. And one's even built with a setting called Frigid Farah, which is designed so users can even simulate rape, which was absolutely horrifying to even consider. Manufacturers market these dolls as a safe outlet. The researchers tells us that most rapists are serial offenders and escalate over time. So what are we actually creating here? A prototype or a place to practice? It was absolutely horrifying. One cyber brothel, which is a place where people can go to interact with these sex dolls, which are coming quite a fad in Europe at the moment. reassure its male customers that it can enjoy unusual erotic adventures to its fullest without the slightest fear of consequence, which is horrifying. That sentence should scare us. It really scares me, and because consequences do land somewhere, just unfortunately, it's not with the perpetrator. On to thing five. It does get a little bit better. Okay, I promise there is some light at the end of this tunnel. So we're still at the early stage of this technology. It is moving fast, but the foundations are being laid right now, and we get to choose what they are built on. And that's the running thread through the whole book. Every harmful system described starts small. It's flagged early by women, but it's dismissed and scaled anyway. And then it becomes too embedded to fix properly. The pattern repeats every single time with deepfakes, the metaverse, AI girlfriends. Every time it repeats. But the author ends with some hope, which I really appreciated and I really needed. And I hope you guys aren't too traumatized by this. The solution does exist. There is an outcome from this. It's in the form of feminist data projects that build in diverse voices, which help to sort of inform the data sets that are already there. AI tools are being created with communities that actually affect them. There's better education in schools, and there's even the EU AI Act, which proves that government can choose to act when they want. Young people consider their lives online, their online identity as an extension of themselves. There's been research done on this, which the author explores. And so how women are treated online must carry the same legal and moral weight as it does as how we're protected in the physical world. But unfortunately, there's one bad part again. In February 2025, there was an international AI ethics agreement that was produced in the Paris summit. However, US and UK refused to sign it. So technology isn't the problem, it's our priorities that are the problem. We're standing at the beginning of something that is significant as an industrial revolution, except this time it's happening in the blink of an eye. We have a narrow window to get this right, and the foundations are being laid right now. The only questions is whether women in marginalised communities are part of the foundations or an afterthought we try and patch in later. So I'm hoping that informing people allows us all to be informed and it helps us to be a bit more informative and help encourage people to make the space a bit more welcoming. We want online spaces to be a bit more like 5 Things. We don't want it to be scary. We don't want women to pull back. So it's just the more informed we are, the more we can try and stand up and encourage government to take a stand on this. And then I promise the next chat I hope will be a lot more uplifting and less scary. Yeah, we're just looking back. The crisis is here, unfortunately. The laws are falling behind. There's a lot of inequality, but we can change it. We're at the start. If we all work together and ensure that it's a priority, changes can happen.
Thanks so much, Michaela. Yeah, it's a tough topic, but a really important one to discuss. I think I was listening to a podcast. I'm going to paraphrase this horribly with Jason Hickel, who writes about degrowth. AI would be a wonderful tool if it was a socialist tool, led and powered by the matriarchy. But unfortunately, AI is just the great amplifier of what exists just now. Yeah, and we're kind of blind to the biases inherent in the algorithms that create that. So
So true. But there's a
yeah,
chance to change it. We all work together.
I wholly agree. Thanks so much. Deep breath. That was heavy. Good heavy. Good heavy. But a lot to take on there. Thank you. On to our final book today. Again, a very orthogonal subject matter. But I met Martin a couple of years back when I was struggling to get my head around sales. Yeah, I think I had quite a negative outlook on that whole thing. And Martin runs Sales for Nice People, which offered me a route, like a comfort zone into sales. It didn't just make me feel crap about myself. Since then, we've become really good friends over the past couple of years. We've had lots of very interesting chats. We had one just yesterday, very philosophical debate about the book that Martin has chosen. It's broken the rules a little bit. Is this fiction, Martin? Non-fiction? The Hitchhiker's Guide?
Well, that is a very good question. Um, And in case anybody thinks that I'm going to follow Michaela's topic with something whimsical, it might be a little bit less whimsical than it would look. The reason I chose this book is not because I want to convince anybody that it's not fiction, but when I read this book, or the four of them in my late teens, it kind of broke something in me in a positive way. It connected with something that my dad used to say. The book itself is, well, it sounds like somebody who just wants to, it reads like the author just wanted to make fun of all the sci-fi out there and went overboard, making things as absurd as possible. But in reading that book, I had some insights connected to, and I'm sorry if this is out of sequence and it doesn't seem to make sense. I am in a process of trying to figure out what it all means and how to convey this, and it's a lifelong project, so please bear with me. My dad used to tell me that the map is not the territory, which is a notion that I could kind of rationally understand, but it never meant anything to me. I didn't really grasp what it means. But when I read that book, I suddenly saw the internal logic and coherence in all the crazy things that he talks about. And it forced me to recognize that, or to experience before I could actually rationally, name anything. I had this profound experience that, I have this view of the world where it seems like this thing causes that thing, and people behave this way because of that reason. But that is just my way of perceiving things. That is a map that I created for myself. And if you have a different kind of view on things, if you zoom in on things, or if you zoom out on things, then that map, the heuristic, the representation of what you think you perceive, might need adjusting. So that was the first thing that the experience of a kind of myopia that I see this thing this way, and therefore it means this thing. And that's myopic. There is more to the story. A map is never complete. You never completely understand an entire system. So that was a beautifully funny, semi-processed experience. I couldn't express things. I just found it nice, and it opened something up in my experience, my perception. But I've never been the same since. Once I read that book, and that gets us to thing number 2, is my dad, he was a systems analyst. So he would go into banks and hospitals and airlines, and he would go into the basement to analyze the software running on the mainframes in the 70s and 80s. And so he was a real systems thinker. And he never talked to me about systems, not explicitly. But in him raising me, I learned how to apply this systems thinking lens. And it's something that I use very often in my work these days, where I try to understand why this combination of team members or this company working in this way or that way, that combination of team members, that company, 2 co-owners, that is all a system. Everything that you observe is a system and belongs to a different system and comprises smaller systems. And once you start looking at the world through a systemic lens, you suddenly realize that the map that you have, that's the explanation and definition of what this system looks like to you, is never complete. There's always more to learn, and there is a big obstacle to your ability to do things with people and in the world, inherent in assuming that your map is it. And obviously, this is a common knowledge. There is nothing too special about it. But what is special is the persistent tendency that we have to ignore data that comes in that says you need to update your map. So we see a thing, people behave a certain way, a government or a social movement acts in a certain manner. And you go, well, this means that, and therefore this is wrong or that needs changing. And then something new shows up, and it takes enormous effort on the individual, on the part of the individual, to accept that new data requires an update of your understanding, an update of the map. So that's what the Hitchhiker's Guide did to me when I first read it. It forced me to see that you cannot trust your own maps, that because you as a human being, you will always fill in the blanks and assign meaning and attribute volition to people's behavior. And let's keep it to myself. I always end up filling in blanks in ways that suit my already existing opinion, my definition of the map. Well, they behave like this, and therefore that confirms that, my map is right. And it is so difficult to be open to the new data, the new information, the new insights that come in and integrate them into your map. And that then is really thing number 3, that, yeah, the Hitchhiker's Guide might be fiction, but what it taught me is that in reality, we all constantly create our own fictions. And then we go, well, this is real. This is the way things are. And a lot of the problems in society and in relationships come from that default automatic assumption that the way we understand something, the way we perceive or interpret something, well, that's the way it is. And therefore now I need to berate you, or I need to consider you a guilty party because that fits with my map and my system. And so I'm living an experience where in my early teens, my dad told me about the map and the territory. And then I read that book and something snapped. And yeah, a funny story is that there's a book by Robert Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land, which is about some alien who's very spiritual. And it's a very beautiful story. I read it around the same time. And when I read it, it blew my mind. It was like, how can things work like this? How can there be philosophy and ethics that this is so beautiful? It was a deeply moving experience to read that book. Then I somehow ended up in a monastery. I spent 12 years there, 6 years as an ordained monk, and I went through all kinds of spiritual training and experiences. And I read the book again, Stranger in a Strange Land. And I thought, yeah, it's nice. It's a nice story. And it didn't affect me. It had no similar kind of impact on me as it did the first time, because I'd lived through so many things that were described in that book. But every time I go back to reading The Hitchhiker's Guide, there is the same kind of revelation experience going on in my psyche, my emotions, that, I have still not figured out how to trust. I still haven't figured out how to call into question my own systems. I still want to consider everything, every map, every opinion as the truth, because I'm smart and I understand things and I'm a systems thinker. So if I think this thing means this thing, well, that's the way it is. And that's why I keep going back to the guide, because it forces me to recognize that, no, things are not the way you think they are. And that is so wholesome. And it helps me become more comfortable with ambiguity and ambivalence. And that, for me, is a real superpower, to live in a space where certainty is not guaranteed. So let's see if I can tie that in with thing number 4, where my abbot used to always say, mind can make any connection. And, your early 20s novice monk, and you're trying to be the best you can, and you have your logic for why you do things this way, and you react to people in that way. And for yourself, you can logic yourself out of any situation. You can justify, rationalize, you can be reasonable, and it all makes sense. But if you really look at how your thought process works, you have to admit at some point that you're making things up. You're making connections between things that only serve you and your pre-chosen bias and opinion of how things are. So this is an ongoing process that I'm trying to figure out, and it's taken me 30 years, and I'm not done yet, to figure out where is the lack of logic and where is the self-serving bias in how I think about things and look at things. So to make this a little bit more concrete and less abstract, there's a story in thing number 5, and it's the shortest story in the world. Baby shoes for sale, never worn. I challenge anybody to write a story that is shorter. Now, that story is a system in itself. It is a map of a sequence of events. Now, you read that story, and you automatically start filling in blanks. For one person, it may mean that, oh, this is probably parents who may have perished in a war. For somebody else, they might go like, oh yeah, that reminds me of that time that my niece had a stillborn baby. And so the little 6-word story gets translated, interpreted into something that you already know, or believe, or have an opinion about. It connects to an existing map. But you can take those 6 words and expand it into 1,000 different kinds of stories. There can be an untold number of maps behind those 6 words. And the big problem and frustration that I have in my life, and that I use books and meetings with people such as Andy to try and overcome this, is to slowly, gradually become more comfortable with ambivalence and ambiguity and simply not knowing what things mean. And the more comfortable I get with that, the things better get, the more things get better. And the more at ease I become with living. And with being myself, really, which is a challenge in its own right. So that's basically what I hope somebody will find useful, that, yeah, your opinions are valid, but what if there's more to the story? What would happen to your life if you would be more willing, more rapidly able to update your maps based on what comes into the data set, what new revelations or insights need to be brought in so that you continuously improve the resolution and the definition and the accuracy of the maps that you have of the things that happen in your life.
Thanks so much, Martin. That was wonderful. Thanks so much. I'm really trying to join the dots. We had a really interesting conversation about like stories like Hitchhikers, Matrix, even like Wizard of Oz. They expose the system that you're living in, which I think is exactly what Michaela did very elegantly today, is exposing the system that we're living in. Like technologies like AI are a bit more nefarious in that way, and it's a little bit more hidden. It's harder to see. I think going back to Joe's talk as well, it's really interesting for me that the sort of homogenous experiences, I mean, we optimize for like, we optimize our experiences so that they're not shocking every day and don't drag us out of our system. But I think in a sense that is required to help us like do that constant work of exposing the systems that we live in. We just get lazy otherwise. Anyway, I made an attempt. As you said, the brain will what was the quote? Sorry. Mind can make any connection. And for me, 3 very disparate books have made a connection for me. Or Michaela, what are your reflections on today?
I think it shows that there's definitely hope out there, and it's how we put it together. You say we're still building the map, we can still make changes, we all work together, and it's focusing on what matters. So it's building those relationships, taking those moments, focusing on things that should be key or powerful moments, and then building that map to make sure it reflects the society we want to live in.
Wow. Yeah, let's
I've
build
had
some
coffee.
maps. We can be in control of these maps, right? We can map this, I think. What tools do we use? Our hearts.
Build for those toddlers.
100%. Joe, you're always find 5 things. Even though your talk was maybe 30 minutes ago, maybe another another wibbly wobbly time thing, but it felt quite long ago now. The preceding talks affected how you are thinking about your talk.
Yeah, I was just sort of making some notes there, just in terms of between Martin and Laura, is like, for me the sort of thread of like Martin talking about confirmation bias and like what are the stories that we tell ourselves. And I suppose you can pop that like anyway, that I guess it's there are, as Martin said, there's thousands of different ways of doing it. And so yeah, what stories are we telling ourselves? But and in my mind it connects with Michaela, sort of our bias is already inherently in our society. Now AI is like this imperfect mirror that reflects back to us, and then I guess it's sort of the sort of it's emphasized even further. But yeah, I think it really does, like, okay, what are our biases and what do we want to create more of, is my sort of loose thread between the three of us, is that we are in control in a certain way. And obviously I believe in relentless optimism on it. But yeah, I think it's very much taking what the facts are there. That's a great warning shot. And then, okay, so what are we going to do about it? And what stories can we tell? Yeah, without what stories can we tell to change this system, because it's not right. It's not, we don't like it. Yeah. I don't know. So many little fireworks going off for me.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's where my brain is. I think that's what I love about these mornings. Makes lots of interesting new connections for me. Believe it or not, we're just past 9, past our hour already. I've had a wonderful time. I'm so glad. I'm so honoured to share this space with such wonderful, smart, caring people. So thanks everyone for joining this morning. A virtual round of applause for our speakers. I really enjoyed all 3 talks this morning. Joe, Michaela and Martin, thank you. Remind us of your Saturday challenge, Joe. Well, Jim's embraced the popsicles for a Saturday surprise. Okay, folks, well, enjoy the rest of your Fridays, enjoy your Saturday surprise, and thanks again. See you later.
Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Andy.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, Martin's gone. I was going to catch up with you all after. How are you? Oh, stop.